Hi everyone, I'm Amir Richards. My major is environmental science. I go to Oakland University, obviously, and I'm running for legislator.
Hi, my name's Nayah. I'm majoring in biochemistry with a pre-med concentration, and I'm also running for legislator. Nice to meet you all.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Johnson. I am running for Speaker of the Legislature. I am a political science major in my third year with a minor in philosophy. I've been a part of Student Congress for a few years now, and I am looking forward to be able to lead the legislature.
Hi guys, I'm Murryum Farooqi. I'm currently the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for OUSC. This is my second year at OU, and I'm a political science major.
Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Romano. I am a political science major and also an environmental science major with a minor in music. Currently in Student Congress, I'm a legislator and I am running for OUSC president. Is that what we're saying? And that's all. So just for clarification first, do you want me to elaborate on each point a little bit of our platform or just the headers? Okay. So we are running on a pretty, I guess you could call it ambitious platform. We plan to get a lot done. Our main points are first, improving sustainability on campus. It's no secret to anybody that Oakland University has lacked in this area. All of administration is admitted to it. I think everyone here on campus can find common ground in saying that sustainability is important to us all. Oakland University and every university is supposed to prepare students for their future. So by preparing us for our future, they should not be contributing to the destabilization of our future by harming our environment, because a lot of the economic sector, whether it be fishing in Michigan, whether it be the automotive industry and its pollutants, is all very closely tied to the environmental future of our state and of our country and of our world. So I think that is very important for us on sustainability. When it comes to tuition, it's more focused on where is our tuition going. Every university increases tuition. That's something I think we all understand, but we plan to rein it in. We don't plan, I'm not going to promise you something we can't do. We definitely can't lower tuition. It's not something that's in our wheelhouse. But there's some questions about where our tuition is going. And it's about our tuition increase this year, 4.2%, whereas a lot of wages this year for student workers only increased 1.013%. That is about a 1-to-4 ratio. The cost of college is growing at an enormous rate, and the way people pay for college by working on campus is not growing to match that rate. Every year, our wages get a little less, and every year tuition goes up and people cannot afford school, and it's causing a lot of problems. Looking at tuition further, there's scholarships. Between the years of 2019 and 2021, scholarships have decreased. All merit-based ones have decreased by some value. When it comes to financial aid ones, it is harder to get financial aid for freshmen coming in the year 2021 than it was in 2019. Your EFC in 2019 had to be 12,000. Now your EFC has to be under 8,000. That's like a 1/3 decrease, 33%. Also with tuition, it comes to where is student activity funding going? The student activity funding, which goes into the SAFEC orgs, which is how all student orgs eventually get their money too. That number per student is a fixated amount, and it hasn't increased since, to my knowledge, 2011. And that number is $27.50. And if you look at it and compare it to inflation, that money today would have to be worth $33.54 to be at the same value. This means that even though tuition is increasing every year, the investment in student activities hasn't been increasing. And this is causing a huge disparity because it means we, as student orgs, have to work with less money than what it was originally valued. Every single year, our money becomes valued at a lesser amount, and we still have to do the same activities. Tuition is bound to increase, like I said at the beginning of that. but it is non-negotiable that our tuition increases should be reflected with our student body and should be reflected in our professors. And I think it's something we've seen this year amongst what I just pointed out for students and what we saw with the AAUP, that the tuition increases are not matching those two sectors. And then I kind of hinted on raising the wage, but wages at Oakland University and wages everywhere around the world are stagnant. They're not increasing enough. And when you see a student worker at Oakland University, the main thing they're using their student, the money they're making is for tuition. So for tuition to be increasing 4 times the rate of their wages, it's not acceptable. It's something that you're making it harder for people to afford the education. And that is, the money goes right back into the school as students do pay for their tuition with their working. And it's something we need to focus on. And I kind of elaborated on it. And if there's questions, I can point out the plans we have for that. But for time's sake, I'll just move into the next point, which is something a little more lighter, which is beautifying campus. If you walk around campus and you just be mildly observant, you can tell there's a lot of dead space on campus. Oakland County and in general used to be a place full of oak trees. It used to be a nice fieldy, grassy area. That's where it gets its name. And now when you walk around campus, there's a lot of empty spots, dead grass, gravel pits, empty flower beds, things that are just like contribute to the atmosphere of campus. And how can we expect students to learn the importance of the environment? And how can we expect to respect our environment when we have been depleting our environment around us? And it also ties into whose land originally was this? And it's something that kind of bugs me because a lot of the things you have planted around campus now is grass and invasive species. And this environment, those species, there's native plants that should be here, and we can work to beautify campus in a way that incorporates native plants and respects the land that we are on that is stolen nonetheless. So that is another important point. Something else that we've talked about as a group is, and that we've been working on at OUSC, is sourcing locally and ethically. And I call this being a conscious consumer. Pretty much what it means is SAFAC, OUSC, even the Office for Student Involvement with events, there's a lot of departments where we make a lot of purchasing. And we have a lot of power through that purchasing that we don't always extend. And it's something that we need to work on reviewing and something we need to work on getting documentation of. Because when we buy things for student activities are great. But where we're putting our money has an impact further among has an impact to where it goes. So for example, a lot of things that are purchased is usually we look for the cheapest price possible. And while that's good for getting the biggest bang for our buck, it's not good for the countries that it promotes manufacturers who have child labor, forced labor, don't pay a livable wage. And these things, or they pollute a lot. There's a lot of companies that will give you the cheapest price, but it goes against what we are as Oakland University. And so with our money, we should not be promoting things that hurt our shared values as a whole. Another big thing for us is addressing the minority graduation rate. This is something I think that has been brought up a few times. And if you go through the statistics, every single time, if you look, white students always end up having a higher graduation rate at Oakland, especially in the 4-year turnaround, than any other race of students at Oakland University. And so if we're going to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And I think it's something that we want to focus on. And then I think the last thing and probably the most important is something that's kind of a redirection for OUSC, which is just leaving the door open for students. And while our meetings always give students a chance to speak, there's a lot more we could be doing to reach out to students and a lot more we could be doing to reimagine our relationship with students. At the end of the day, we're a student Congress, and we should be focused on our student body, and we should be making sure and making a positive effort to hear all the concerns of our student body. Whether if I don't agree with it, whether if Murryum doesn't agree with it, whether if anyone doesn't agree with it, we should still be listening. And I think it's something that Student Congress lost sight of. One of the things we propose with this is creating a General Assembly, which would allow student orgs to come in and send a delegate once a month to OUSC to be able to speak and give their updates about their constituents, and also just be able to promote resolutions that we can send to admin. Because at the end of the day, Student Congress is one small fraction of the population, and if we want to get more representation, we need to give people more avenues. Another thing, me and the person who's running with me, Murryum, I don't know what to refer to her refer to her as, we've committed to is once, if the election goes in our favor, of course, we will have a system where we will have posters around the OC, and it will have a QR code on it where anyone can scan it, and they will have access to a calendar thing where they can set up an invite, and we are willing to meet with any student to talk about any concern within obviously hours that we're available. So there'll be a system set up so that students can scan that and schedule a meeting with us, and they can share their concerns. They can share any help they need, and we will be more than willing to hear anybody out. And we will fight for every student, even if, let's say again, we don't necessarily agree, we will still advocate for you. And that is our platform.
Jeremy, were you about to say something? Did it look like?
Go ahead. Unless you want me to, I can speak.
Okay, Andrew.
For me personally, it's probably a little biased, but if you know me, you know that I'm really big about sustainability. At the end of the day, that's probably the thing. When I first came into Student Congress, I was very much dedicated to sustainability. And if you look to our platform, about 3 of the main points about it that I kind of contributed has to do with sustainability, whether it's focusing on beautifying campus, which I see that more as encouraging students to have an appreciation for sustainability in nature, because all things start with a passion. And then whether it's advocating, whether it's the dining hall initiative, where we're going to make sure that students have the utensils necessary to be sustainable and helping students be equipped with that, or whether it's the conscious consumer, where it goes to where are we putting our money. And something that, of all those things, I think something I'm really excited about is figuring out renewable energy and energy efficiency at Oakland University. About 4% of student tuition goes into the building's maintenance and energy costs. And something I think that would be really interesting is if we could start to lead the way in renewable energy as a Michigan university and invest a lot more in renewable energy to have that return on investment of, obviously it would save money over time. So just selfishly, I guess I would say environmental stuff, especially sustainability and renewable energy.
Yeah, I can go next. Andrew kind of already talked about this. Something we both, everybody on this platform or on this slate agrees on is that what OUSC should really focus on moving forward is initiatives. So that's something I'm really excited about, that we spend our student money for things that last, hopefully, I want to say forever and ever, things that we implement that students can use as services for years to come. Not a one-time, like for me, it's either you give a student maybe one night where they have a fun time, or a service that they can depend on and that future students can depend on for years and years and years. And to me, as Student Congress, the best option is initiatives. So I'm really excited for that new direction that we'll be taking.
Yeah, for me, as speaker, the thing I would be most excited for, and the thing that I've been working on throughout the summer, would be to reduce the cost of college for students as much as possible. What we see and what is articulated in our platform is that the way in which a lot of people experience struggle is through their finances, is through how much money they have. And unless students are enabled to afford the cost of college and have all of the resources they need to succeed, college isn't going to be a good experience. And to do this, we're going to advocate for raising the wage to $15 an hour. I wrote a resolution during the summer that calls for a $15 wage. And I know that the entire slate is interested in fighting for a $15 wage for student workers and every worker at Oakland University. And this also means doing things like trying to reduce the cost of necessary materials students need for classes, like books, money that they need for transportation, or any other required resource that they need in order to fulfill their role as a student at Oakland University. Ultimately, unless students are enabled to succeed, unless students have the resources they need to thrive as a student at Oakland University, then we are not doing our job as leaders on campus, and Oakland University isn't succeeding in creating leaders as they say that they want to do. Students need to be able to have the freedom not only to pursue what they want, but the actual ability to pursue what they want. And that is only possible if we empower them through giving them the resources they need.
I would say I'm excited to just hear an overall change in morale on campus. Holding a position on campus, I hear a lot of the complaints and just areas where students are unhappy, and it's very disheartening because it's all fixable, easily fixable. So I'm excited to get started and get the ball rolling behind those different things.
I'd want to say I'm excited to try to bring life back to campus. I want to try to plan more fun and social events. So, like, more of the freshmen and people who haven't, and sophomores who really haven't experienced dorm life before can get to know their community better and interact with one another better. And I think that would be nice.
Well, I think I'm going to start off here. I mean, I think a lot of the things on our platform, I'm sure anyone could say, "Oh my God, how are you going to do that? It's so difficult." And like, you're just throwing stuff around and like, well, where's the plan? But I think something really good about our platform is that Andrew is great at creating a really clear plan on what are we going to do to get there. Like an example of this is with rating and tuition. We had a whole discussion, me, Andrew, and Jeremy about, Jeremy, like, how are you going to do that? That just sounds like, how do you rein in tuition? Like, that's such a big thing. But I know Andrew really wanted to do it because he knows that is obviously one of the biggest concerns of all students at OU. That's huge when you're going to college, tuition. And so, and I sat there and watched as Jeremy was like, well, how are you going to do it? What's, all these roadblocks? And Andrew was like, well, here's the plan. um, and so, I mean, it was kind of Andrew's plan, but I have a quick, the highlights that I can at least say are, it's just looking at little things like OU already spends, whatever percent of money on energy, on that's not clean energy. But if they switched over to clean energy, you're saving a little bit of money, and that money can go towards students. There's always areas where costs can be cut, and we really just want to advocate for OU to cut those costs in places where, we're switching to clean energy or something like that, rather than cutting costs, let's say, as we all know, they recently tried to do with, professor contracts. We want to advocate, we want them to cut costs in areas that make sense, in areas that, take us somewhere positive, and not in areas that hurt our own community. So we hope we have plans, and maybe implementing them might be hard, but at least we have a plan, and we have somewhere to start.
I would interpret the question to be, there's really hardest in which way for me, because I see it as a lot of the platform in general is really interconnected. So if we're making progress in one area, we're making progress in another area. And we did that on purpose, primarily because, we are students still too, and we have class commitments too. And so sometimes you can't really put energy towards everything at once. So that way, when we accomplish one thing, it can be interconnected. And also it works out too, because they're not too connected, where we can't, like, if we get stuck somewhere, we can also hop around to the next thing. But in terms of the hardest thing to accomplish, I would say it really depends. I think institutionally, the conversation around sustainability is something, there's a lot to do there. Sustainability is an umbrella term. There's a lot of things OU's behind on. Like we don't have an office for sustainability like most colleges in Michigan do. We don't really have, we have some renewable energy, but we don't really have an amount that is prepared for the future. So there's a lot of things that we deal with at Oakland when it comes to sustainability that I would say, in terms of, there's a lot of different facets we could go through there. In terms of hardest as in the biggest thing to work on, I would say that's probably reining in tuition. I know, like, respectfully, there are people who work really hard to figure out where the money goes and everything in appropriations, and I'm sure they have a different perspective than us as students. So it's going to definitely come to a lot of compromise there. It's going to come to a long conversation. And it's going to come to advocacy. We can have all the demands we want, but if we don't compromise and if we don't advocate for what we need, as students, then it's never gonna get anywhere. So I think in terms of trying to reach out and compromise, that would be. And then the last hardest thing I see in a different facet would be long term. Hardest and what's going to be the longest to achieve. And I would say that's when we're getting at how are we going to raise the wage? Because as student Congress, we can encourage a conversation and we can set a tone, but we can't mandate other departments, which a lot of our plans have been, how are we going to tackle these things? Because everything has a challenge. And so we have made sure to tailor things for sustainability. It's going to come to having a director work on some sustainability initiatives and having, us work on other sustainability initiatives. When it comes to tuition, where it's going to be harder for admin things, it's going to be bringing in all the student orgs to a conversation of what do we need as the student body as a whole within this student assembly we're proposing, and bring all the orgs together, and then having us as a unified group go to admin. And when it comes to longnesses in terms of, it's got a long conversation we need to have, and it's going to take some time. When it comes to raising the wage, it's going to come down to how can we as OUSC be able to afford it and budget it? How can we set the tone and then talk to the greater staff fac and all they employ and figure out a staff fac minimum wage? And from there, we can set a tone to other departments, see us as the leader in that. And the other departments will have to match us on that, because it's going to be a conversation of we're going to pay our workers an equitable wage, and then it's going to put pressure on every other department to figure out how they're going to do that too. So everything has its challenges. So if that makes sense.
I just thought of something else I wanted to add. I think something that will be really difficult is just making sure we set up our initiatives in a way that they actually stay after we're gone, graduated, out of office, whatever it may be. Because, a lot of initiatives that we want right now used to be initiatives at some point in time that just ended. So, for example, the Bear Bus. So really, hopefully we can set them up and ensure that there's some mechanism where these things don't just disappear really easily.
So respectfully, this is kind of a tricky question, because I don't know if I would say, like, this is one area, I think, I personally don't know how students are doing every single area. That's why I plan to have areas for students to be able to meet with me and obviously Murryum, and also be able to, advocate through orgs. I think there's a lot of areas on campus. There's a lot of challenges for a lot of different people, and everyone's facing their own challenge on campus. So I don't know if I can say like there's one specific group. Like, for example, like, my problem is not going to be the same as somebody else's problem. And I think a lot of the, I think one of the problems in Student Congress's past has been we tend to overgeneralize and assume that, just by doing like programming towards a general topic, we're going to cover everybody, and we're not. It's going to be a lot of continual conversations, and it's going to be a lot of feedback as the student leaders. So, I think we have a pretty diverse platform to hit a bunch of points, but that is why part of our platform is leaving the door open to students, because we're purposely leaving a piece of our platform, a part of our time carved out to be developed over time. Our platform, I don't consider it, and nobody on the slate considers our platform done. Our platform is not finished until we leave office, because when someone brings me a new idea or someone has a new issue come up, I want to be able to focus on that too, and I want to be able to help people, because things change. Our experiences right now is not going to be the same experiences in a month. So when those concerns arise, we will be focused on those because we've left room for it. And I think that is one of the best things you can have, an open mind to these issues.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to add to this is, on top of that, if you were looking at our platform, I think one of the things that really sticks out is that we're really trying to advocate for economically disadvantaged students with raised the wage and rein in tuition. And, there are also things related to diversity and inclusion on our platform. And that's because a lot of the economically advantaged students are oftentimes people of color. So there's a lot of overlap. It's hard to say there's just one little group of people that we're going to dedicate all our time to energy to. Usually, in the world, it ends up being, there's always a lot of overlap where it's not, you can't just kind of separate people. Everything always kind of is compounded, and so we're trying to address that through all of these different categories on our platform.
So I kind of alluded on this, but I can go more in depth. So I've already kind of proposed this, but if elected, then I would be able to see it through to be done and actually executed properly. But something I think Student Congress needs is, we do have provisions for legislators, but 23 legislators to represent a student body that's over 10,000 people is ambitious, right? So what I've proposed and what I'm hoping that we can see through is the General Assembly, or we also call it the Student Assembly interchangeably. So either or, you can pick which one you like, but essentially this will be the first Student Congress meeting of every month. Student Congress has two avenues of passing things. We pass bills and resolutions. Resolutions are things we want to call for, encourage, or take a stance on, and we bring those resolutions and share them with university administration. It's really the avenue for change. It's how you vocalize problems in the student body. And every first general body meeting of every month, we will reach out to every student org, and we have methods for that, and we will reach out to them and we will invite them each to send a delegate from their student org, and those delegates will have the chance to speak on a resolution. They can introduce a resolution. We've already drafted up like a proposal for it, and that way every student, student orgs, there's over 300 usually. They represent a lot of different groups of people, and then on top of that, to further the communication, we will be encouraging them to get together in caucuses monthly with other student orgs that have similar interests with them. So for example, my big thing is sustainability. So there would be a sustainability caucus where any of the student orgs that care about sustainability would be able to get together monthly and have continued discussions about how can they work together to improve university sustainability and their shared goals. And I think, united as a student body and finding ways we can work together on our shared values, I think we will be able to get to a lot done through that. So I think that's the biggest piece on representation and communication.
Yeah, I can add on to that just to give some background. As the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, I'm on a lot of committees that relate to, different heritage months and representation in that sense. But the focus is always very event focused. So that's a little bit of where this came from, because we want to have a platform or, a method to talk to people about initiatives and not only events. So I think this is especially a good thing for whoever is Director of Diversity and Inclusion next, whoever is Director of Student Services, because those things especially want to be able to talk to the different orgs and work together with them on initiatives.
And if I could just add on one more thing, I think it's important, you're kind of elaborating to it, I think it's important to just hit home, like for example, Pride Month is in June, but I don't want to just meet with people to plan for Pride Month, and then I don't want that conversation. I want this to be like, how can we make life easier on campus? How can we advance the rights, respects, the graduation rates of LGBTQ plus students on campus? I want to have that continued conversation monthly. I don't want to talk to you when it's, I don't just want to talk to you when it's like, what is it, May? I don't want to talk to you the month before Pride Month and be like, okay, let me plan one event for you. No, I want to have a continued conversation so we can figure out how we can work together over the year, if that makes sense. Well, communication with administration, it can be tricky at times, and it's definitely never giving up. That's probably the biggest thing I would say on that is, personally, like just like for the students, how we were saying, like you can meet with us at any time. Administration's the same. Like if an administrator requests to meet with me at any point, like I will meet, like I will always, even if we don't agree on something, because administration, they represent admin, they represent the students, but they have their own staff, and we as students, we see things from a student perspective. It's different perspectives. So it's definitely like first just acknowledging like I don't think, we don't have the same, we're not always going to agree on everything naturally. As human beings, none of us always agree on things. And I don't think it's something that we should shy away from. And I don't think it's something that we should act as taboo because it's just it's human nature. And so it's definitely just understanding that we're not always going to agree, having continued conversations. And the best thing I think for, explaining to administration is sometimes it's hard to know, like, is this really a student Congress concern or is this a student body concern? Which is why I think by giving resolutions and the power of resolutions and opening up to every student org, I think there's power in numbers and there's power in representation. I think the best way to communicate with administration is showing that this is a student concern, these are the student concerns, gathering testimonials, gathering, orgs to agree on things. I think presenting administration student concerns in a way that's united is probably our best bet with communication.
I'll add on to that and say, in addition to, the student testimonials and everything, I think something I've learned being an OUSC is that not to, always immediately take whatever someone in administration tells you as, I guess we can't do anything about it. Like, I think it's really important for us to make sure that we're doing our own research about things, about the situation. And it's not that I'm not trying to say they're like trying to mislead us, but, as administration, they, have their agenda, and as student Congress, we have our agenda. So I think it's important for us to make sure we research and make sure we have all the information before we go to them.
So I'm glad you asked that because the very first thing when I joined Student Congress, the very first thing I did was to pass a resolution and bill to accompany it to introduce a font policy, which is essentially it's calling for the end of mandating fonts. To give background, students with reading disabilities are usually, it depends on the font. Different fonts work for different people. If everybody liked one font, and if one font worked for everyone, then there wouldn't be a million font options in the world. There wouldn't. So a common one is Times New Roman, which for some individuals who have dyslexia, Times New Roman can be a tricky font because it is a serif font, which means it has a bunch of like ornamentations with it, and it can obscure the shapes of letters and everything, which increases the likelihood a dyslexic person would misread the letter or the word. And so I wrote it into the OUSC bylaws that we would respect a font policy that encourage sans serif fonts mainly, which are ones without ornamentations, and then also just give people more options on fonts because a lot of times, like I said with Times New Roman, as we assume it to be tradition, but if you look at APA or like any formatting style, they don't demand you do a very specific font. They encourage different fonts. If you look at big research papers, they're not always in Times New Roman. And to have students be marked down because they use a different font, I think is ridiculous. I don't understand why we would need to mandate fonts. And another thing is students who have dyslexia and are trying to type with a specific font, if that font doesn't work for them, then they're making mistakes because they're forced to use that font. And that's not fair either to mark a student down for. So my biggest change in academics is to encourage a font policy that a professor would give its student at least 3 options for a font. I don't think the days of mandating one font, I think, are old school. And I just think it's something that should be changed. And so that is the biggest thing I'm focused on when it comes to academic reform.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. And it all kind of goes, the academic side of our platform all kind of goes under a little bit like neurodiversity and just being there for those students. So, and we can totally also add on to this list, going with our listening part of the platform. So like one example of something we could do better is offer ADHD coaching, either the tutoring center or the counseling center, where students with ADHD have different needs that need to be met going to college than neurotypical people. So, and I know other colleges also offer these things, and so it doesn't make sense why we wouldn't, if we can, offer services to level the playing field when it's kind of an unfair situation otherwise. Why would we not do that? I think that's super important that we do that. And then another thing that similar to tying into, I guess, the font policy is the thing with time tests. That, so like an accommodation a lot of people can get for different disabilities is adding time onto tests. But again, like with the font policy, not everybody, like, so with the font policy, that is nice because it's kind of giving an accommodation to everybody across the board, whether or not you've been diagnosed with anything, right? So, and then with time tests, you usually can only get this extension or whatever for time tests if you document that you have a disability. So we would advocate that professors, if there's nothing, if they can make a test not timed, why not? Because that's the same thing where you're giving, like, everybody should be given the option, everybody should be given this accommodation, just in case there are people who maybe don't know that they have some kind of disability that's causing them trouble. And so if it doesn't hurt, if it's not, really causing all these huge problems, we at least want to encourage that professors, if you can, if it doesn't hurt, why not just give everybody, unlimited time and, not stress people out with time tests.
I guess first I just say what I see in a student body president, what I think is important. And I think one of the most important things is ambition. I think it's communication. I think it's it's the willingness to sometimes be wrong, but to try. The willingness to seek out answers when you don't know them. And it's those kind of things, an open-mindedness that I think is important for a student body president. And I'll admit, like, I haven't been in student Congress that long. And I think people will look at that and they'll question it sometimes. But I will say that in my time I was in student Congress, I passed over 25 pieces of legislation, which is a lot, a decent amount from what I've heard. In our congressional session, in this year of OUSC, nobody else has written more legislation. And just because more is not always better, don't get me wrong. But I'm always willing to be ambitious. I'm always willing to work with other people. And a lot of my bills, there's always a lot of co-sponsors, which is something not everyone can say. I work with pretty much, I think, everybody on a bill in student Congress. And I think it's also a big thing that I put on my platform, which is the willingness to leave the door open for other students. And it's, at the end of the day, it's the something of being able to fight for what you believe in and being able to fight for what the students need. And I think that's something that's very clear with me, whether it was when I was fighting for student workers' rights back in March, whether it was advocating for a font policy over the summer, whether it was pushing for sustainability since I've been here, whether it was programming and teaching and having engaging conversations last year with students about sustainability. You always have to be approachable, have an open mind, and be willing to push for what you believe in. And besides that, I would just say, again, ambition, which I think I have. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll go next. I'll add on to Andrew's a little bit more. I think he always has tons of ideas. He always has good concrete plans for getting those ideas done. And I think I'd say he's the most collaborative person I know. We've had plenty of times because we've worked together on a lot of things while we're in student Congress. And there's a lot of times where I don't think this person is on this. I think we give up. And he's like, no, let's talk to them. And then we end up making some type of progress. So communication, I think that is one of his biggest strengths and something that you definitely need in the student Congress president. Some background on myself is I joined as a committee member my freshman year of OU, and then I became a legislator that fall semester. So I was a legislator for a year. and now I've been the director of diversity and inclusion for the past few months. And as director, I've had experience both in the legislative and the executive board. So I'm bringing that with me in just terms of knowing how things work. I've gotten to work on initiatives a little bit as a legislator, but definitely a lot more as director of diversity and inclusion. I've had experience working with and talking to administration. Did the diversity it's really committee heavy compared to other directors. So I'm sitting in with administration, and so I'm interacting with them a lot, and so I have experience communicating with administration on different things. And I've already started working on serving the students over the summer in terms of giveaways and interactive social media experiences. But yeah, so I think definitely my experience in both branches and getting to work with administration more are both really going to be really needed in a vice president, especially because I'm kind of working with the legislature a lot, and I've really enjoyed my time as a legislator. And I think we joke about that because Andrew has had a lot of fun as a legislator. So yeah, I'm excited to get to work with the legislature because bills and resolutions are really exciting to me.
Yeah, and I can add on real quick. I'll say insofar as leadership when it comes to the legislature, I think it really is split into two categories. The first of which being leadership within the organization. I will strive to make the legislature a place that has an environment that's conducive to success, one where we celebrate each other's successes, pick each other up when we fail, push each other to be better, and ultimately strive for ambition. And I know that Murryum and Andrew will do great in the executive office, but a lot of student Congress success is also reliant upon a legislature that is not only functioning efficiently, but is also ambitious in its goals. And as long as we are on the same page with the executive office and in our ambitions, I think that there's a lot that we can do. And in addition to internal leadership, the legislature, at least externally, will be as open with the student body as possible. We will obviously always be looking to recruit more members to have more people join Student Congress and voice their concerns and represent their interests and the populations that they come from. And Murryum and Andrew have articulated this, but we will also strive to have some sort of an open door policy, which has become sort of a cliche on campus to say open door policy. But we will do our best to actualize that goal. And I know that Andrew and Murryum will as well, because we want to make sure we have our hand on the pulse of campus to ensure that we are in tune with everything that's going on at OU, as well as we are knowledgeable about the concerns and issues the students are facing, no matter how big or how small they may be.
I would say for me, the 3 years I've been at this school, I've worked for multiple organizations. So I've been able to meet a lot of the students here and form relationships and hear a lot of the same complaints from then to now. So I'm ready to get some action put behind those because there's no reason for that. And yeah.
And I'd say for me, at this point, I feel like we just need, in addition to what some of the things that they all said, like, I feel like we just need that trying force. We need someone to actually attempt to make that change because we haven't had too many people speak up around campus. And we also need the social connections to also be making those changes. So I feel like that's it for me. That's what connects me to the students.
So I guess that kind of falls to me mainly. How I see it as, yeah, there was a recent turnover, and yes, we've had some tumultuous times, a bumpy road, but if you can tell the platform, it's very much looking forward. We're very much focused on how are we going to, back to the students, back to our roots. And I think bringing OUSC back to its roots of, Student Congress started as a union. It started as fighting for the students and advocating. And I think our redirection of just looking forward, but also going back to our original values and looking forward with an ambitious policy agenda. I think that's one of the things I plan to do. I think I kind of talked about this already. I'm very talkative and I'm very open to just speak. Like I'm very open to working with anybody. And I think that'll help a lot with, I think there has been a historic divide between the branches. And I think I'll be excited to go to work with anybody and everybody, even if they're not in Student Congress. So I think that'll help kind of patch a divide there. The main thing I would say about how I plan to unite Student Congress is just focusing on what we can do when we're together, looking to the future, and being ambitious, because there's nothing that unites people more than having a shared goal and shared values. And we're not going to agree on everything. I don't think anyone expects us to. But the things we do agree on, we can make a lot of progress there. And what we don't, we can work as individuals on to do. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing I would think of.
Go ahead.
And I'll just say, like, our campaign has been very much focused on how are we going to unite and move forward. I was in the legislative branch. Murryum was in the executive branch. So it's very much a time of healing too, as we need to find shared goals. At the beginning of the fall semester, when our budget didn't pass initially, and it was kind of a somber meeting. Everyone kind of stopped. But the first thing I did was made a copy of the budget that didn't pass, sat down with some people in the executive branch, sat down with some legislators, and I talked back and forth. And this is something I think that I usually handle pretty well, is just talking back and forth and figuring out what can we agree on, and let's get that out of the way. And the things we don't agree on, we can work on as individual things, but that shouldn't stop us from the future and what we can achieve.
Yeah, I was just going to add on, I definitely think, so obviously unity is a priority, but at the same time, I think sometimes unity is kind of weaponized against groups, just agree with us, unity. It's kind of used as a way to push someone to agree with you. That's happened to me as a legislator where, oh, don't disagree with eBoard because we want some unity. But to me, it's not really a functioning government if we're all agreeing all the time. That's kind of a red flag to me if we agree on every single little thing all the time. So I think it's natural. I think we have to, obviously there's always going to be disagreements, but the important thing, kind of like Andrew said, is being able to work through them and, still communicate and, compromise.
If I could just add one more thing, it would be that, I guess, how I see it as we are Student Congress, as Murryum kind of hinted at. We are essentially a government in a way. We're not always going to agree, and that's okay. And I kind of, over the summer, I wrote a policy into our bylaws that was called the conduct policy. And it's very much focused on, we're going to have disagreements, but our disagreements shouldn't become personal, and we shouldn't take them too deep. I will debate with anybody for hours on policy, on anything to do with sustainability, anything, any policy. And if you've been in Student Congress, you've probably seen me debate on it. But once the debate's over, once the general body meeting ends, I'm not going to take that personally, because I encourage debate on, everyone's perspectives coming together and sharing their opinions. That's what's going to advance us forward, and that's what's going to make us great. So encouraging a healthy environment of debate without taking it personally, I think would be probably one of the biggest things in getting Congress back on track.
And I can add on, kind of bouncing off of what Amir said in his answer to the previous questions. What we found when students speak up about concerns that they're having or engage in some sort of activism to mobilize other students in pushing back against bad decisions, is we found that either they are in a way defanged, they are somehow brought into the fold or made less powerful, or they are crushed and made so they cannot enact the kind of change they're trying to seek. And I think part of the healing process when it comes to OUSC, and more broadly, unity on campus, is empowering the ideas that are ambitious, empowering the ideas that may challenge what we have currently, but seek to build a brighter future. Because ultimately, what is the point of government if not to be subservient to what students want? And if we are to be a successful student Congress, then we must listen to the ambitious ideas the students have, even when they may not be fully fleshed out, even when we may need to build an entire plan around them. Part of the healing process and part of truly realizing the potential that Student Congress has is engaging in those ambitious ideas that may make people angry, may upset some people, may encourage some frivolous debate, but ones that are worth pursuing nonetheless. And the goal of the Student Congress Legislature will be to platform those ideas, give a place to speak for students that are worried or concerned about certain issues, and we'll be working with the executive office as much as possible to pursue those ideas that we want to see realized.
Jeremy, do you want to go first? Don't want to pick on the spot.
Yeah, sure. I would say that our platform is, as we've said, very ambitious, but also very doable. And although a lot of the things that we want to see accomplished are difficult and may take several years or may even take some time after we have left, I think our goal is to establish a student Congress that is willing to not only advocate for students, but is willing to fight for students when necessary, and do everything within our power to return, whether it be economic power, social power, or whatever else it may be, to the student body. Ultimately, our goals do involve some amount of systemic change. We also want to, like I said previously, have our ear to the ground and know exactly what is going on with the students. New issues will pop up throughout the administration. There will be new things that we have to deal with. Crises will pop up, as they always do, fairly often, and there will be more things that we have to handle as they come our way. And our goal will always be, first and foremost, to put the needs of the students first, prioritize what they need, and to make sure that all of our decisions, no matter how big or how small, are in service to the student body, and never in service to ourselves or some other part of the bureaucracy within Oakland University. Everything we do will be motivated by what the students need.
I'll go next. I think, so if someone, was telling me they're a little bit not sure about whether or not to support us, I think two things I would bring up to them. Well, first, I think I would ask them, what would you want us to add? Hinting at our listen part of our platform. What can we do for you? What are we missing? Because just because if someone's, not sure about supporting us, it doesn't mean that they hate us. It might be we missed something. It's hard to represent everybody. As as director of diversity and inclusion, I face that every day. It's hard to represent everybody. So number one, I'd want to ask them, is there anything we can do to make this more appealing for you and to, to stand up for you? And number two, I'd want to, emphasize that this is kind of a change from the norm in Student Congress in terms of we're really trying to focus on initiatives, which as a student, I'd say that's the best deal you can get. If someone is focusing on initiatives, which is, services going straight to you that hopefully last a long time.
If I were to close on this, I would just say there is definitely some uncertainty right now. There's, rightfully so, students are confused. There's been a lot of he said, she said, they said. There's been a lot of that. There's been a lot of back and forth. People don't really know like what to believe, what not to believe. And, all I would ask is that I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to love all of love all of our slate even. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for you to hear our message, read it out fully, and give us a chance. At the end of the day, it's really going to come down to taking a chance. And I know right now Student Congress kind of does look a little tumultuous. It looks we've lost a lot of people. It's kind of gone crazy a little bit. But I would remind you that, something I've learned in environmental science is that sometimes when things and ecosystems, they start to get old, you have to have change. Things, there's ecosystems that are engineered to burn every once in a while. and that allows for new plants, and it makes the ecosystem more healthy. And I do think that Student Congress will come back better from this if we work as a team. And I'm asking you as the student body to take a chance on me. I know I'm still new in Student Congress, but I don't think ambition and to be new is wrong. What I learned last year is when I came into SOAP, which is Sustaining Our Planet Earth, everybody, we were hired in for the fall semester and everybody was new. There was not one returning member. And everyone was worried that we would have a really bad year because of that, because there's no experience besides we had leadership within our grad staff, but we didn't have anybody returning. And that year, we all just went into it with an open mind and we took a chance. They took a chance on us to hire a whole new staff. And we were awarded RLA's Program of the Year that year. We had the highest programming numbers SOAP ever had. And we had some of the biggest initiative change that SOAP had ever introduced to campus through like the dining hall initiative and working with all those things. And so it's scary. The future isn't, we're in scary times, not just with Student Congress, but with COVID. And there's a lot going on right now. And I'm asking you to take a chance on our ambitious platform and to let me work for you. At the end of the day, this is a job interview. I'm asking the student body, please vote, please take a chance. At the end of the day, we'll always have the door open. So even if you don't like what we're working on, I'm always willing to talk with you and hear your concerns. And that's pretty much it.